Ecco il tempo e il luogo della comunicazione. Un sistema dinamico, interattivo, accessibile. Un flusso inarrestabile di informazioni scorre nel nostro quotidiano. Milioni di persone ogni giorno vogliono sapere, aggiornarsi, conoscere. Siamo tutti connessi in un battito di tasto. Per noi le parole hanno un peso, vanno scelte con cura. È questo il nostro impegno quotidiano, verità e correttezza per rispettare le idee e i fatti, e soprattutto le persone. Noi abbiamo scelto di raccontare la realtà con un linguaggio corretto, semplice, coerente, perché portiamo avanti un'idea positiva e propositiva, rivolta a tutti, perché crediamo in un mondo migliore e nel bene comune, perché dietro le notizie ci sono le storie, e dentro le storie, sempre, le persone. Ed è questo che ci rende unici. Per noi le parole hanno un peso, ma anche le ali.
Ecco, direttore. Grazie.
Per volare oltre pregiudizi, oltre i confini della discriminazione, per superare gli ostacoli del cuore e della mente, per oltrepassare la paura e la superficialità, per vedere e comprendere ciò che è lontano, ma che è più vicino di quanto non immaginiamo, perché è la nostra storia ciò che leggiamo. Il tempo e il luogo della comunicazione. Un sistema dinamico, interattivo, accessibile. Un flusso inarrestabile di informazioni scorre nel nostro quotidiano. Milioni di persone ogni giorno vogliono sapere, aggiornarsi, conoscere. Siamo tutti connessi in un battito di tasto. Per noi le parole hanno un peso, vanno scelte con cura. È questo il nostro impegno quotidiano, verità e correttezza per rispettare le idee e i fatti, e soprattutto le persone. Noi abbiamo scelto di raccontare la realtà con un linguaggio corretto, semplice, coerente, perché portiamo avanti un'idea positiva e propositiva, rivolta a tutti, perché crediamo in un mondo migliore e nel bene comune, perché dietro le notizie ci sono le storie, e dentro le storie, sempre, le persone. Ed è questo che ci rende unici. Per noi le parole hanno un peso, ma anche le ali.
Ecco, direttore. Grazie.
Per volare oltre pregiudizi, oltre i confini della discriminazione, per superare gli ostacoli del cuore e della mente, per oltrepassare la paura e la superficialità, per vedere e comprendere ciò che è lontano, ma che è più vicino di quanto non immaginiamo, perché è la nostra storia ciò che leggiamo.
civiltà dell'amore. Fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
Buongiorno a tutti.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this session. Let me thank all the speakers of today, Davide Rondoni, writer and poet, Raffaele Cattaneo, a Councillor for Environment and Climate of Lombardy region, and Giorgio Vittadini, President of the Foundation for Subsidiarity. I'll introduce myself. I'm Fabrizio Piccarolo, Director of Lombardy Environmental Foundation. If you want to cultivate peace, you have to take care of creation. This is the title. This is a prophetical sentence by Benedict XVI, who entitled his speech in 2020 for the Day of Peace. And we wanted to focus on this sentence, and we have entitled the exhibition that we have in Pavilion number 3, organized with the Lombardy region. Why are we here today? Well, the title of the meeting of this year, A Passion for the Person, has been quite provocative. And this is a good opportunity to show our approach in doing research on the environment, which is the aim of our foundation. It is a scientific entity doing research, carrying out studies and implementing projects, and carrying out dissemination activities and cultural activities on environment and sustainability. The starting point is that there can be no passion for the environment if there is no passion for the person. This is the first point that we will discuss with our speakers today. And this is the question that we will ask them. Today, in this session, we will discuss a point of sustainability, which takes its origin from the Laudato Si by Pope Francis, which talks about a journey that has been taken by the Church over the past years. Let's think about, for example, Caritas in Veritatis by Benedict XVI. Our foundation has started to work on Laudato Si in summer 2015, a few months after the publication of the encyclical. It's a journey that we have been doing with somebody else. We have been working together with other entities which are in love with man, with the human being and sustainability, and therefore the three speakers of today are three companions in this journey. Environmental culture has always been a very interesting topic for the foundation and for its activities. And this is enshrined in our Articles of Association. The foundation was set up in 1986. And the original name of the foundation at that time was not called the Lombardy Environment Foundation, but Foundation to Study the Relation between Man, between the human being and the environment. So This topic, which is also taken by the title of the meeting of this year, has always been of the utmost importance for the Foundation from a cultural and social point of view. After 7 years of the publication of the encyclical, Pope Francis' message is more urgent than ever, and we can see it from the recent events in the past few months. This is an opportunity to understand how it is possible to make an alliance between the human being and the environment, as indicated by Pope Francis and as called for in the encyclical. With the concept of integral ecology, Pope Francis says that the environmental question cannot be not intertwined with the social issues. These are topics concerning human beings directly, and as such, they need to be implemented within a multidimensional approach. Is the alliance between human beings and the environment necessary? Human beings focus on relations as well as nature, and this relation between human beings and nature is so close that when human beings look at creation and watch creation, immediately the human being immediately asks questions on themselves, and this is the source of the title of today's session, quoting Leopardi's poem, Who Am I? Because while the poet is looking at the creation, the first question coming out is, who am I? So this is a very important relation. The relation between human beings and the environment is very important. And this is the new anthropology proposed by Pope Francis, which is necessary as a basis for the ecological transitions. These are pending topics, open topics, and topics on which the Foundation has been working for the past 7 years. And we will ask the speakers of today how, in their working context, in their daily life, how they approach these topics, what they think about sustainability and how they approach sustainability in what they do. They are distinguished representatives working in different contexts, in different sectors, and this gives you the idea that the integral ecology can be possible, and it's going to be interesting to hear from each of them. So we will start with Davide Rondoni. I will introduce him by saying that we already met last year during the 700th anniversary of Dante's death. Davide came to give a lecture on Dante and nature, and he gave us a lot of insights, and he was quite provocative in his thoughts. And we continued working with him on that during the year. On that occasion, he said that the question on the vision on nature is the question on human nature itself. And this is also the title of today's session, Human Nature and the Relationship with Nature. So I'll give you the floor, Davide. A big round of applause to Fabrizio, because the introduction is also very important in the sessions. Thank you for inviting me here. To Leopardi's question, who am I? What am I, not who am I? This is a question of 1830, so it's not a recent one. Leopardi, as other geniuses of that time, understood that modernity, or that time could not answer to that question. And if you don't answer to this question, how can you look at nature? Because nature is there for man, and nature exists for men. Artichokes exists for men, for human beings. So when you look at nature, you have to think about yourself, about your own identity. What am I? No answer has been given to this question. The answer is still pending. And there's a partial answer that has been given today, because it seems that the answer to the question, what am I, is fragmented into different identities. I'm Italian, I'm white, I'm homosexual, transsexual, transgender, as if those adjectives were my own nature. So the answer that society is giving to that question, which is a strong one and it is inevitable, every question, all kinds of questions are made, even looking at the stars. When everybody started talking about nature, virologists, and so on and so forth, I'm dealing with poetry, and I said to myself, maybe Leopardi, Mario Ruti have already talked about nature. Poets have always been talking about nature, and they've talked about nature like all artists do, talking about the paradox that nature has. It is very natural. The wood is very natural and beautiful. I took my my family live in a wood, but in a wood, you live in a house defending yourself from animals. You have to fight nature in order to live in a wood. And now it's very trendy to embrace trees. Well, I don't know whether you can stay for a long time embracing trees in a wood. So maybe poets have something to say about nature, and I made this book entitled, What is Nature? Ask this question to the poets. And there's a paradox. Leopardi understands that the volcano does not ask for permission to erupt lava to others, and this is a paradox. And this it raises a question: who am I? Why am I here in this wonderful and terrible world? It is wonderful, but it's also terrible as a world. Who am I? What have I got to do with this? When I heard that everybody talks about nature, I realized that nature as a topic was dealt with by eliminating this paradox, as if nature was just Eden, was just heaven, as if nature was something very friendly with the human beings. Everyone agrees on the word nature. Then my friends know that much more than I do. Then there's never an agreement on nature, because everyone agrees on the term nature. But when we start discussing what is natural death, for example, what is natural birth, it is more difficult to agree on the adjective natural. So the word who am I is even more important when you talk about the paradox of nature. Human beings sometimes are considered as nothing. Human beings are not made to last forever, but they are made to understand the meaning of nature. So I'm going to be very short, and maybe I'm not too clear, but all these questions have to do with Leopardi's question, and our culture is not answered to that question. Pasolini, when he was asked, give me a definition of yourself, who are you? Pasolini said, it's like asking for the definition of the infinite. And Father Giussani said, I is a relation with the infinite. This is your nature. All the rest is just an adjective. I'm from Romagna, I'm from this region. And if I thought that my nature is being from this region, being Romagnolo, I would be angry because in the Italian constitutions, there are no words in my own dialect, for example. I would like that the first article of the Italian Constitution would include words from this region, words in dialect. But if this is my identity, if my identity coincides with nature, there's a lot of confusion today. We can discuss nothing today, because if each identity is my own nature, then every time I criticize you, I'm offending you. Because if I say to him, I don't like your suit, I don't like it, but he is going to say, this is my identity. So the only answer that we have given to who am I is an endless list of identities. And then there are stronger identities, weaker identities, but there's a confusion here. And this is very bad. This confusion generates anxiety, because no adjective is a place where you can coexist with your nature. It's something suffocating you. And indeed, young people are suffocated by that. You cannot talk about nature without properly answering to that question. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about embracing trees, reducing CO2 emissions, reducing water consumption. And this is right. Even if I don't think that if you don't drink more teas than whiskey, your life is going to be more natural. I don't think that being more natural is related to your habits. We're working a lot on what human nature is, but we don't talk about it. The project that has been most funded by the European Union is the BRAIN project, and is not on migrants, because they want to study what human nature is. But we're not talking about this. We take for granted that we know what human nature is, with an ideology, a capitalist ideology, a new fascism, as Pasolini put it, and therefore this is the Amazon of the identity. You can choose who you want to be. As you choose a shampoo at the supermarket, you can be free because you can choose your own nature, you can choose your own identity. So this is what I see. Today, there's the right need of having a natural life, leading a natural life. But if you don't correctly answer Leopardi's question, who am I, everything said on nature is banal, is naive. Who are you? Are you an artichoke? Who are you? Are you white? Are you from this region? If we don't understand this, then it's totally useless to talk about nature. And we see that at a political level and at a social level. Nature is something, when you talk about nature, you talk about anything. You talk about nuclear power, you talk about pedestrian zones, everything is related to nature. And this is grotesque sometimes. We need to understand that this ideology is very strong, because not answering, or rather giving a partial answer to this question, is suffocating and creates anxiety. And this is underlying everything else. And there's a lot of ideology on that, because they want to convince us that the biggest problem we have is lasting forever. So, why do we admire people who have given their life for things in which they believed? So it might seem easy, but we are living at a time where a man is something, has only a biological identity in order to make the species exist forever. And if you don't agree on that, then you are dead at a cultural level, at an academic level. And I'm saying that because these are not easy times. Talking about that means opposing the power, opposing the strongest power, which is not the police. I'm not talking about the police here, but I'm talking about the power which has a strong influence on the showbiz, on the fiction, on the television, on the media. And it's making us think that we are organisms that have to last. It's clear. we hope that we can live long, but this is not the main problem we have in life. Why is the life of an 80-year-old man less worth than the life of a 20-year-old boy? Is it really so? And this is the meaning of Leopardi's question, and very few geniuses have been able to answer this question. I am the relation with the infinite. John Keats, a major poet, answered, I have no nature. I have no nature. There is no adjective that can identify myself. I am from this region. I am male. I am white 100%. But today, too much focus is given on the identity in order to answer this question. And to me, this is wrong in order to talk about nature, which is an incredible topic. But the volcano here continues not to ask for authorization to erupt to others.
Grazie, Davide.
Thank you, Davide. Thank you very much. As always, you've always given us lots of insights, and we'll certainly have the chance to touch upon some of the insights you've illustrated. So, Raffaele Cattaneo, the Councillor for the Environment and Climate of the Lombardy region. We are approaching the end of this legislature, and the Lombardy Environmental Foundation is an entity of the Lombardy region. So the research studies we carry out aim at providing data and findings, as well as knowledge, as well as to produce knowledge to political decision makers, especially to the ones of the Lombardy region. We've known each other for long, and we've often had useful exchange over the last 5 years when it comes to the Lombardy region environmental policy. If I were to use a slogan to define the meaning of sustainability, the sustainability policies you pursued, I would say that the person has been at the very core of the Lombardy region's environmental policies. So my question to you, with reference to the question I posed at the beginning, I would like to ask you, what is the origin of this approach? What is the starting point of these policies on the environment and on sustainability, which have placed the person at the core? So thank you, Fabrizio. Thanks to you all. It's 1:30 p.m. and it's not trivial. It's not obvious that there are so many people here present here. So I am not a decision maker. I deal with policies, but there's one thing that is clear in mind for me. Without clear thoughts, you do not come out with clear policies. If you have only approximate thoughts in mind, you come out with approximate measures. If there is a superficial thought, well, you come out with superficial policies. So in this first round of answers, I would like to focus on the ideas that Fabrizio and Davide have already shared with us. I am very much convinced, and even more so after 5 years as a councillor for the environment, I'm very much convinced of the fact that the issue of the environment, as well as the issue of sustainability and of ecological transition, in other words, that of creating a sustainable growth model, is paramount. It is the most important topic of the next 10 years, as well as of the next 3 decades. This will be a topic that can be compared only to the Industrial Revolution. In other words, to that revolution that has changed everybody's lives 200 years ago. So we are addressing a very serious issue because of the data. I remember that 40 years ago, when I was following the courses by Don Giussani on theology, Don Giussani used to say that the first methodological premise is realism. You need to love reality much more than your idea of reality. And today, if you look at reality, well, reality tells us that the environmental issue is something that we cannot ignore. And that is because the average temperature of our planet has gone up by 1.2 degrees since 1880, and 95% of climate experts are telling us that we can even reach up to only 1.5 degrees more. And from that moment onwards, the consequences will be very severe, will be a catastrophe. And if you look at the emissions of greenhouse gases, we can already see that we have already exceeded the limits. Emissions continue to go up. And with this trend, if we follow this trend, by the end of the century, we will reach a temperature that is higher of about 3.4, 3.5 degrees centigrade. Data is telling us precisely this. Data is telling us that we are witnessing a dangerous loss of the biodiversity that endangers about 40% of living species. So the pandemic has been the example of the fact that we have broken a balance created by nature in a million of years, and that has then enabled the spillover of a virus that had already been present in the animal world from animals to man. So we have to face these issues, basically. There are frequent examples of this, the fire in Pantelleria, and at the same time, the storm in the Versilia region in Tuscany, or even here. This is just the beginning of the consequences we might face. And reality is posing us with a challenge. That is to say, we need to face a different model. How can we do this? First of all, we need a different way of thinking, a way of thinking that is up to the challenge. I believe that today we feel the urgent radical need of having a political and above all cultural approach that is in line, that is up to the challenge of sustainability. The Laudato Si, that is to say the encyclical that Fabrizio mentioned before, is, in my opinion, can be compared to the Rerum Novarum of Leone XIII of centuries ago when it comes to labor issues and to the birth of the socialist movement. And like in those times, the church was a bit, in a way, in a difficult situation when it comes to this topic. As if this issue could be faced with that cultural approach, but that is not the case. That cultural approach is not capable of providing an answer, and therefore it is not capable of generating policies that are up to the challenge we face. We need a vision of man and of reality. For example, the Pope talks about anthropology. In other words, we need a vision of man, of nature that is up to the challenge. In the Laudato Si, the Pope says that there is no ecology without adequate anthropology. And what does this mean? Within the movement of the Fridays for Future in Great Britain, there is another movement, Birth Strikes. Bryce Pepino is the leader of this movement. She wrote a pamphlet. The title of this pamphlet is Against Having Children. And actually, she theorizes that one of the most effective measures to fight against CO2 emissions and the emission of greenhouse gases is to stop having babies. The very same Fridays for Future movement has been the realm within which the Green Inclination Mocklinks was created, which is also against births. The very same Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez, the youngest member of representative of the Democratic Party in the United States and one of the Democratic Party emerging leaders, actually posed this issue. Actually, she raised the issue. She said, she questioned the opportunity to, in a way, give birth to children. So this topic, who are we, is very much in line with this. Do you think that this kind of anthropology is in line with the challenge? In other words, positing that, for example, as the world is a wrong world, then we should not give birth to children. We should no longer have babies. This is basically what, in the end, generates policies. So from this point of view, we should not debate that much whether man or nature are at the core of our debate. If you talk about policies in which man is at the center, actually, if man damages nature, that's not important if you have negative consequences on nature. Or, for example, Eurocentrism. Actually, the examples I'm giving you are not abstract. The municipality of Cremona 3 years ago issued a document in which it stated that actually not having children can help combating the environmental crisis. The document was then withdrawn, but that was made. And so the issue of anthropocentrism is not an abstract topic. The Ministry for Education issued a circular document in which it states that we should quit talking about the environment, focusing on man, but we should rather focus on nature, biocentrism, because man, the person, is only one of the living beings, and what matters is nature. So nature is what matters. If you theorize and posit this way of thinking too much, and you lead to the Anthropocene. There was a documentary made 3 years ago. They documented that man actually destroyed nature. And the idea that you have behind is that man is like a virus. So if we leave him go, well, then he or she destroys nature. So we need to stop him. Otherwise, nature won't have a future. So this is basically the level of the cultural challenge we have to face. What is the culture that we as Catholics can oppose to this? I believe that we urgently need a political and cultural vision that is capable of providing a balanced answer to this challenge. The Pope is telling us that actually the issue is not that much anthropocentrism or biocentrism. Both approaches are wrong. The Pope is telling us that the relation is the issue. We need to establish a balanced relationship between man and nature, because man is part of nature. And creation is made up of both man and nature. So actually, man, the person, poses him or herself the question over the meaning, but because of this, he or she cannot ignore that they are called upon to establish a positive relationship with nature. So if we continue destroying the environmental and ignoring the problems caused by the loss of biodiversity, are we truly establishing a balanced relationship with nature? No. The answer is no. So we need to understand how we can do this and what policies we need to do so. And we need to have a cultural vision that is not ideologically grounded as the one of Greta, the Fridays for Future, and the environmental movement, which states that, of course, we can sacrifice everything to counter the environmental problems, but which at the same time does not have a negationist approach, which is also very fashionable. Many people consider that the issues we're discussing are simply not there and that nothing serious will happen. That's not true. We need a huge transformation. This transformation will take place over the next 30 years. So we need to decide whether we want to serve as the protagonists of this, with a passion for the person capable of providing adequate answers, or if we want to be passive in front of this.
Grazie. Giorgio Vittadini.
Giorgio Vittadini, the president of the Foundation for Subsidiarity. So the Foundation for Subsidiarity has always been interested in sustainability issues, and this has probably been the reason for an activity that he's currently pursuing together with between our environmental foundation and the Foundation for Subsidiarity. So my question to Giorgio is the same. Namely, why has the Foundation for Subsidiarity, why is the Foundation for Subsidiarity committed with environmental issues? I would draw again from the encyclical of Pope Francis, which states that this idea of a common home is basically directly related to the concept of a common asset, and the common asset is entrusted to everybody's responsibility. So probably it is here that subsidiarity can be closely connected with sustainability, but this is just my interpretation. Well, I believe it comes earlier, because if you know me, I have always defined myself as a green Catholic, well before Pope Francis, many years before Catholics started saying that we need to defend men and not nature. And I believe that this stems very much from my consumption. I would like to read you a passage, an excerpt on the sea. This sea, which is now calm, and you can hardly hear it, and then after some hours it is passionate and you don't know why, but be it calm or agitated, silent or not, the sea has a minimum common denominator, meaning a common inexorable meaning, which is its richness, its aspiration towards the infinite, to the infinite mystery. Similarly, your life, your good and bad moments in life are based on passion, on a voice, on an agony, which is at the basis of everything. And that voice, that anxiety, happiness, beauty, supreme beauty. This was an excerpt by Don Giussani, who said that basically it is stupor, amazement that comes before. Actually, I like nature. That's an aesthetical taste that constitutes me. Like in front of the piety of Michelangelo, I cannot but be amazed by that. So we cannot but start from amazement, and that's moralism. I am happy as a person to see that there are trees surrounding me, that there's air. I adore having tigers or wolves. That's fundamental for me, like for children. Even if I'm never going to see a tiger, because that's part of my being. My being needs this relationship, and this has always been the case for 2,000 years before the destructive ecological neoliberalism that massacred the environment. This is my way of knowing things. So my starting point is an aesthetical one that has closely related with my religious things, and that's basically that issue. Man has to start from the fact that you are happy that this exists. I'm grateful to the Lombardy region, not because it is appropriate, but because actually they established the Ticino Park and the South Park, and because of that my land will exist. It will not be destroyed by speculations, real estate speculations, as in other areas of Lombardy. So there will always be this possibility of not going to the Amazon area, but rather to actually see beauty, to experience beauty 5 kilometers away from Milan. This is fundamental, this is paramount for me and for millions of people. Well before thinking about the fact that park will provide us with oxygen. Otherwise, actually, I'm made up of that land, as Davide is made up of Romagna, of the Romagna area. So basically, beauty is our starting point. And instead, what are the alternatives we are presented with? The first one is there, and it is basically this neoliberalism, so this destructive man that has nothing to do with religion. So the economy of individuals' selfishness that will bring everybody's welfare, and which in fact has created inequalities and destroyed everything, which has led to wars. So we're talking about a limited man who is selfish and destroyed the environment, and this is there to stay, because actually building speculators or polluters or the ones who destroy the Amazon area, the Amazon forest, those are criminals. They have nothing human in them, and they are our enemy because they actually compare beauty and limit beauty to money. The environmental movement was created because there's an enemy which speculates over nature, which does not care if there is no sustainability, and also because of the politicians that supported that. And the second one is today's environmental movements. They start from moralistic issues. For example, if you look at Greta's opinions, that's scary. She says, well, you're ugly. That frightens me. She's not a nice person at all. Because you have to start from the fact that beauty is one thing. Actually, if you look at a child and actually are presenting the child with fear, the child will obey, but then in the end he or she will do what they want. You should not demonize the world. Even for example, the workers who... So environmental moralism destroys amazement and stupor as well. That's why they do not bring results. That's why it becomes mass moralism. Either you move vis-a-vis man and his desire, even actually opposing this dichotomy between man and nature. It's both man and nature, not man or nature. Actually, children have this already in themselves, and this dichotomy is the result of the moralism. Environmental movements are moralistic movements, and as such, they limit reality. So first you have to focus on amazement, and then there's a second topic, which is the opportunity, in a way. You have to understand why it is adequate to carry out separate waste collection, and why we need, for example, to create treatment plants or depurators, why it is appropriate and maybe even adequate not to pollute towns. You have to understand that that's better for you, for production. Sustainability has to be grounded on education, based on which you understand that it's not adequate to bathe in the Ganges River, which is a river that actually pollutes very much and pollutes the sea very much. While it is not adequate to live, for example, in certain areas, for example, in Beijing, because of excessive smoke. You should have people understand. For example, you have to show them why plastics is not good. If without an educational purpose, people will find themselves to apply norms without knowing the reason why. There is first and foremost an educational pathway that has to be supported, and that has to show why tools are needed. So when I see that, for example, glaciers melt, I am happy that I can do my part in order for that not to happen. I saw a wonderful documentary in Super Park in a couple of days ago, showing the desert, showing how to plant 1 million of trees to stop the desert, or how you can reconstruct the forest. That helps. If you don't have this educational pathway, you are in a way getting rid of men because of this, and that's the second problem. So the conception that my colleagues were talking about actually focuses on the religious self, or the religious self as a relationship. And here lies the novelty of Pope Francis. Pope Francis has managed, like people like Don Giussani or Pasolini. Pasolini made a statement and there was a statement on fireflies. And actually, he explained why they are needed. But first and foremost, you have to like them. If you don't have this pathway, there is no conception. And people will be faced with a new form of moralism that will lead to destruction. And here lies our educational task.
Grazie Giorgio.
Thank you, Giorgio, and thanks to the three of you for the first round of questions and your answers. You have really given us a lot of food for thought, and you have really focused on the topic, and you have made us able to understand better this topic, a topic which is really urgent and important. Now, let's go with the second question. How can the cultural change be made, be implemented? In practice, what can we do in order to live this change up to the urgent need we have? Davide, I was struck by what you said before on the fact that human beings have to last in time, have to live forever. I was struck when you said that the general approach to the environmental issues, the question asked on environmental issues, is related to the fact that human beings have to last, have to live long. And then please, the floor is yours. I think that this is really the point. What is time for man? Why some days you feel younger, some days you feel older? There are days that last forever because nothing interesting happens, and days that pass, that last little. The time for man is the meaning of time. If we only focus on duration, on years, on the duration of the planet, Dante was asking himself the meaning of cosmos and not the duration. If we only focus on duration, then it's trivial, it's banal. Giorgio was talking about amazement. I would talk about amazement and tremor. Which is the only thing that cannot be marketed, because capitalism is not opposed by communism, but by the sacred, as Giussani and Pasolini understood. Something, the holiness, the sacred, is what goes against the capitalism. Leopardi, in his poem Ginestra, I don't know whether there are some teachers here, but I made comments on Ginestra because Ginestra has always been perceived as a poem saying, okay, we can mutually help each other from a social point of view. And that poem starts with St. John saying, the light has come, but man has chosen the dark. And this is a treatise of anthropology, of Christian anthropology. And Leopardi says that the man showing his strength based on wealth, on richness, is stupid. Because the wise man, Leopardi says, does not show that, does not show wealth, but show himself, show his strength, and show his treasure. The problem is to be educated and to beg for education. Man in nature has to be like a beggar, and a creative beggar. Because as Giorgio knows, the parquet was mentioned before. It was not made by nature, but by the Lombardy region. So it was made by man. So the relation between man and nature. And this is something we have to recall and to remember from an educational point of view. We cannot talk about nature without talking about human nature. And we have to remember that. because this is where the problem starts. So, to Leopardi's question, you need to answer, otherwise it is totally useless to talk about nature. Man is an abyss of amazement, of tremor. Man is sacred. It cannot be marketed. So re-educating to the sacred is the most important thing we can do now. And Pasolini has already understood it. In 1922, Eliot published Desolated Land, which seems to be quite an ecologist, the Wasteland. The Wasteland starts with a quote of a Latin writer, where the youth ask Sibylla. Sibylla is the sacred image. Sibylla is a prophet, was the women living signs on leaves and living poems on leaves. And these youth ask the Sibylla, the sacred, what do you want now? And she says, I want to die. Sibylla's death, the sacred death, coincides with the wasteland. So, from a cultural point of view and from an educational point of view, to me, the urgent need is that nature has to re-educate to the sacred, to the sign of the sacred, to amazement and to tremor, which make the men beggar. Giorgio talked about Giussani beforehand, and he talked about agony. So, see leads to agony in man, because the amazement for beauty is deeply linked to the tremor for the sacred. And Pasolini understood this. When the sacred disappears, he said, a new fascism will rise, which is the capital, which is the fascism brought about by capitalism. And this is what is happening today, because everything can be marketed if there is no sacred. Pasolini was against abortion because the sacred had nothing to do with abortion. So we educate our children to green, to sustainability, to nature, drink tea and not whiskey, embrace trees. Okay, this is right. But if that does not coincide with the education to the sacred, this is just a fairy tale. This is totally useless. And so we need to have amazement and tremor. People who do not feel amazement and awe before reality. We cannot ask Greta or some politician to do this. This is not possible, because this can be done only by people who feel it. Adults who are moved by the sacred can re-educate to the sacred. And this is the point where man and nature are combined. Men cannot see themselves as artichokes or computers because they understand that they cannot be marketed. And therefore, what they do cannot be marketed. And this is related to nature. Without that, the mix between man and nature is just negotiation. The landscape is a negotiation between man and nature. But this is not the point linking the two, the linking point. The linking point is the sacred, which has to take account of who need houses and that we need trees. And this is the negotiation between man and nature. Man had to fight against nature in order to live in some places, and vice versa. This is not the linking point. The linking point is the meaning of the sacred. But we have to know what the sacred is. Otherwise, this battle is totally impossible.
Grazie, Davide.
Thank you, Davide. Unfortunately, we have only 7 minutes each for this question. Yeah, but we can continue a bit longer. Greta is not with us, so we can continue if you want. Okay, so leave the timer aside. I could continue the whole day if you want. But sometimes we have to go for lunch. Same question to Raffaele. At a political level, in order to comment on what you said before, what are the political aims and objectives of the Lombardy region, and what has to be the focus of politics? What is the main aim of politics in order to help the close link between man and nature? Let me talk about what Davide said at the beginning, because it's not that Giorgio, since he has a lot of passion, maybe potentially has made us think about a misunderstanding. Lombardy has protected a lot of parks. We have the park of Campo dei Fiori, of Groane. We have many parks at the Sud, and so on and so forth. In Lombardy, there are some 40 parks, 235 sites of community interest, which are specially protected. 23% of the land is protected in Lombardy. But that land that Vittorio loves, and I love it as much as he does, think about how it was 1,500 years ago. It was a marsh where nobody could live. And who has transformed this land? The monks who worked there and have taken marshes away and have created the Padana Plain. And this is also written in the Gospel. Over the past 2 centuries, we have talked a lot about cultivation, and we have worked a lot on cultivation. Now we have to take care of what we have. But taking care does not mean leaving everything pristine. This idea that the environment is good if it is not touched by man is something, it's not true. Man has to take care of the environment. Otherwise, nature cannot live with man, cannot host the man. If you leave wood as it is, then the wood becomes impossible to manage. It is man who makes possible the coexistence between man and nature. And I'll give you some examples. Let's think about waste. In Milan, we have had a waste emergency in 1995, and I remember that because I had just started working for the region. I was working with Formigoni. At some point, the dumping site with where all the waste was received, all of a sudden, it was blocked by environmentalists. Probably there was some political reasons behind it. And we had to manage waste emergency in Milan. The environmentalists said we have to do waste sorting, and that's enough. The industry said, no, we can build more dumping sites, or at least we can build more incinerators. What have we done? Well, we have combined the 2 things. We have introduced waste sorting in Lombardy, and today in Lombardy, we have 73% of waste sorting in the region. And then we have made the plants so that waste fractions could actually be recovered and recycled, and we have made the thermal processing plants. We have 11 out of 37 in Lombardy, out of 37 throughout Italy. And now we have circular economy policies based on waste reduction, which continues to decrease, and then on the recovery of materials. 73% of waste sorting leads to 62% of waste recovered, and we can recycle 55% of waste. More than half of the waste goes back to the economy, has a second life in Lombardy. What cannot be used as a material? Is it better to put it in a dumping site, or is it better to burn it as a fuel, as an alternative to gas and oil to produce gas and heat? 27% of waste which is not recovered as a material is recovered as energy in Lombardy. In 1995, more than 80% of waste went to the dumping site. Last year, the waste that went to dumping site was 0.02%. So dumping sites no longer exist in Lombardy for urban waste, and 0.5% for decaying fractions. So this is an environmental policy which is adequate, which can combine the best things. Here we have with us Roberto Sancinelli in the room. He built a company recovering 750,000 tons of organic waste and 250,000 tons of plastic. And with organic fraction, he's doing composting, then biogas, and then biomethane, which is used as an alternative to methane coming from Russia. And CO2 is used for water and for drinks. So this is circular economy, and this is the result of good policies. And I could give you some more examples. Now we're talking about energy transition to renewable sources of energy. But what does that mean in order to fight against CO2 emissions? What does that mean in practice? We don't have to be ideological. Everything, we talk about renewable sources of energy. We have just approved the energy plan in Lombardy. In Lombardy, talking about electricity or thermal energy or any kind of energy. Fossil fuels account for 85%. Renewable sources account only for 15%. If we want to comply with the objective of Fit for 55, as in reducing CO2 emissions by 55% by 2030, over the next 2 years, we have to do two things: reducing by 1/3 energy consumption. So every family, every company, every entity has to consume 1/3 less in terms of energy. Unfortunately, energy consumption has been stable for more than 30 years in the past 30 years. Just think about how we have to involve everyone, families, companies, with a subsidiarity approach in order to achieve that aim in 8 years. And together we have to double the production of energy from renewable sources of energy. Hydroelectric power, can we double that over the next 8 years since we have less water and less snow? This is impossible. Well, the dike and dams are even worse than the nuclear power plants. And then the second source is biomass. We have 450 plants using animal manure in order to produce biogas and biomethane. But they can survive thanks to benefits that we give to them. We don't have wind, there's no aeolian energy in Lombardy, there's no sea. We can use photovoltaic systems, solar energy, sun energy. But in order to double renewable sources and arrive to 30% of renewable sources of energy, we need 7 gigawatts of solar energy plants. 1 gigawatt is 1,000 megawatt. In order to create 1 megawatt, we need an hectare of land. Let's say an hectare. An hectare is a football field like San Siro in Milan. 7 gigawatts means 7,000 hectares, 7,000 football fields. We have 1,500 municipalities. It means that each municipality must have, over the next 8 years, in order to get to 30% of production from renewable sources of energy, 4-5 football fields of photovoltaic panels, solar panels. This is not simple. So it's easy to use the slogan, everything has to be renewable, but then you have to work on that. And we need to be realistic. And this is why we need to have the nuclear energy, a fourth generation nuclear energy and possibly nuclear fusion. To conclude, either politics can be realistic in its actions, or we can only use slogans. We can talk about no carbon. It's like the public debt. We have always been saying that we needed to reduce public debt, and it's been on the increase for years. And we cannot lose this challenge. This is why we need to support, even at the next elections, those political forces that strike this balance, that promote this culture. Otherwise, we're going to die out of ideology.
Thank you. Giorgio. So I would like to talk about the work of the Foundation for Subsidiarity. But first, I would like to ask you a question that probably highlights the problem. Do you know what the UN 17 sustainability objectives are? Could you please raise your hand if you remember them all? So this tells us a lot about the problem. And we have reduced this list of objectives to 17. So zero poverty, zero hunger, wealth and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water and hygiene, clean energy, decent labor, industry and infrastructure, reducing inequalities, sustainable cities and communities, responsible consumption and production, working for the climate and life underwater, life on the earth, peace and justice, partnership for the objectives. So can you please tell me what the fil rouge for these things is? You do not remember them because actually we do not remember them because we need a fil rouge to bind them all. Actions are not directly turned into action. So first point is that we need to understand what the points are that relate our personal perception, so amazement, tremor, and our opportunity with actions, basically. I would like to share with you my personal fil rouge. The fil rouge for this is first and foremost man. Man who wishes to work in a sustainable way is the same person who wishes to reduce inequalities and who wishes to have sustainable cities. It's the person who wants a working climate. Unless you have man in the center, the person in the center, you do not have the fil rouge. So this is something that also has to deal with operational issues. We need to wonder what it means to have man, to bring man back in sociology, in the sciences. Just remember that the founder of sociology, Auguste Comte, in the 19th century started from the presupposition that humans, sciences had to be made similar to biology and medicine. So the whole approach, if you reduce the human approach, the human aspect, that's not sustainable. So the work that we wish to do as the foundation is based on man. So what does it mean for man to have decent work? Kind of work in which the person is a resource. In which, for example, you respect the family, in which you have maternal leaves, in which creativity is important, and in which you do not have massification, but you take creativity into account, or a kind of work in which, for example, you have towns in which the person is at the center of decisions. I mean, all of this is at the very basis of sustainability. That's why, actually, we say that moralism leads to forgetfulness. That's because you don't have any fil rouge. Then there's the second aspect. There are two conceptions, which is that of discretion. Otherwise, you have the happy degrowth. But Just tell me how you can recover the Amazon forest after this. I mean, you need a huge work in which scientists understand that if they bring together a series of seeds, in some years you will have new areas of the forest will start. Or, for example, if you plant certain plants at the sides of the desert, you can stop the desert from spreading. Or, for example, you need the Mose facility to save the Venice lagoon. So you need work also to improve the level of work. For example, this applies to the whole issue of smart working. Actually, education is done more with the internet, if internet is not only social media. So man's work is the tool that we now have to implement sustainability. And the same applies to the climate. You need a lot of science, a lot of technology to support the climate. Happy degrowth means that you no longer have income to pay your health or to have education. So are you willing to have this? We all agree on this, but then in the end, we need doctors, we need a health system. So work, technology, science, and the knowledge of man are the factors that make it possible to have a happy self. And then the third passage is subsidiarity. The self has to be educated. The person has to be educated to the sacred, but that too requires places in which this education takes place. So the self alone is not educated. The very same sacred dimension needs religious and human places. The self that creates work, that produces work, is not alone. It's a team of people. It's not Michael Douglas in Wall Street. That's no longer fashionable. I have a friend who works for Musk. In SpaceX. Actually, work today is teamwork. Before working on a project, for example, for Elon Musk, you have to submit that project to the members of the team, because the idea is that you have to be criticized and to be able to reply. So this is an element of education and an element for communication, because you need to communicate on certain topics. For example, I am an environmentalist and I am in favor of nuclear power and against water power. Clean and nuclear power, in my opinion, is much better. And I would like to discuss this without ideologies. I like to discuss with environmentalist groups and with the industrialists. Nobody is repository of the truth on this, but you need to communicate among scientists and then among politicians. So subsidiarity as a starting point for dialogue and for communication and experiment. So working for an economy that has man at the center, for education in favor of the person, for policy enabling dialogue and underscoring certain areas like, for example, parliament, or the dialogue between policies that provide information and that talk about the people's management of parks. That's fundamental. So you need to have subsidiarity principles of this kind. So the self, work, and subsidiarity are the fil rouge of subsidiarity. I would like this aspect to be further analyzed. There are And I would like also people like Giovannini who address this issue. The social pillar of subsidiarity is very weak. I mean, the whole reasoning about the environment is very weak, but all of this is very weak. And unless we do this, we won't be able to do policies. Otherwise, we will all be far away. When in our activities, you have something that is understandable with places in which education takes place, then only then will we be able to participate in this process. And I think this is the process for which the meeting and the Foundation for Subsidiarity work on this. We believe that the method that has been used to face the intermediate bosses, education and work are something that can make subsidiarity something more attractive for people. Thank you very much to our dear guests. It seems to me that the approach and the method we have experienced and listened to today are the right way, or at least a very interesting attempt to take into account in facing sustainability issues. Once again, I would like to end by quoting Pope Francis. We are going through a change, an epochal change, and to overcome that change, we need to have a cultural and anthropological change, like the one that Pope Francis also requires. So we, as Lombardy Foundation for the Environment, are, of course, very much interested in continuing this kind of work. We are present here at the meeting of Rimini meeting in Pavilion A3. We have labs, we have exhibitions, and there's lots on offer. So I would like to ask you to visit us so that we can continue talking about sustainability. At 5 and 7:30 every day, there are two sessions. One is a more scientific one at 5, and the other one is more art-based with Davide at 7:30. I would like to conclude with one last indication. The meeting is a unique event, and it is the result, the surprising result of an extraordinary human collaboration. So civilization does not come without culture. So dialogue is its blood, basically. So the meeting can result for this, and any of you can contribute to this. You will find the counters with the indication Dona Ora, donate now, with the label of a red blood. Donations will have to be made only to these desks. You will see volunteers wearing a red T-shirt. There's an important piece of news. Starting from this year, the Meeting Foundation is a third sector entity, and so if you support the meeting, you will have the chance to have tax deductions when you present your tax declaration. So thank you very much. Thanks to our guests, Davide, Raffaele, and Giorgio, for this great opportunity. Thank you very much.
Civiltà dell'amore, fratelli e sorelle, costruite senza stancarvi mai questa civiltà. Lavorate per questo, pregate per questo, soffrite per questo.
tempo e il luogo della comunicazione. Un sistema dinamico, interattivo, accessibile. Un flusso inarrestabile di informazioni scorre nel nostro quotidiano. Milioni di persone ogni giorno vogliono sapere, aggiornarsi, conoscere. Siamo tutti connessi in un battito di tasto. Per noi le parole hanno un peso, vanno scelte con cura. È questo il nostro impegno quotidiano, verità e correttezza per rispettare le idee e i fatti, e soprattutto le persone. Noi abbiamo scelto di raccontare la realtà con un linguaggio corretto, semplice, coerente, perché portiamo avanti un'idea positiva e propositiva, rivolta a tutti, perché crediamo in un mondo migliore e nel bene comune, perché dietro le notizie ci sono le storie e dentro le storie sempre le persone. Ed è questo che ci rende unici. Per noi le parole hanno un peso, ma anche le ali.
Ecco, direttore. Grazie.
Per volare oltre pregiudizi, oltre i confini della discriminazione, per superare gli ostacoli del cuore e della mente, per oltrepassare la paura e la superficialità, per vedere e comprendere ciò che è lontano ma che è più vicino di quanto non immaginiamo, perché è la nostra storia ciò che leggiamo.